Hello, welcome to CSS. All right, this will be the first session of this course, the first session of this chapter, the first chapter of this course, okay? So we'll be looking at what is CSS. And basically, introductions are always boring because we'll not be writing code. We'll be talking more of theory and explaining what CSS is and what CSS is not. And I know some of you might have gone through this before. You know what CSS is, but let's just take a deeper look at it, okay, before we get to writing code and seeing stuff about CSS, okay? So CSS is cascading style sheet. That's what it means, cascading style sheet. Okay, it is a language used to describe the presentation of a document written in markup language. And the markup language we basically use HTML. Okay, so when we write our content in HTML, we want to present it. Okay, so how does the presentation come? What does it look like? Okay, so that is what we use CSS for. So we use CSS to make a better presentation. Your HTML content can still be viewed by your users without any issues, but CSS will make your web page look more attractive, look more beautiful. Basically, CSS is the makeup. You understand? When ladies make up, they look more beautiful. So CSS is what is the makeup for HTML. Okay. So we use CSS to make up HTML for HTML to look good. Okay. So it is used to style web pages. So CSS controls the layout, color, font, and other visual aspect of a web page. Okay, so this is what CSS actually does. And CSS is also used to separate um, the content from the presentation. The content is HTML, all right? The presentation is CSS. And with this, when you have this separation of concern, it improves maintainability and flexibility of web pages. If you imagine you're writing your CSS inside of your HTML, you're styling your HTML page using, maybe you're styling it inline, okay? So it would be messy, especially when you have big application to write. So CSS provides us with separation of content, separating the content from the presentation. Okay. So why do you need CSS? Okay. Why do you need CSS? CSS allows for customization of web page design and layout. Okay, the way you design and the way you present the layout, okay, you can use CSS to do a whole lot of, you can use CSS to give different types of layouts, different looks. A web page can be styled in more than one style, okay, and it will really look good. With CSS, you can design it anyhow you want, so you customize your web page. It also improves user experience because CSS ensures consistent and responsive web page presentation. When you want to build a web application so that people who are using mobile phones would also use it, you use CSS to make it to make it very, very responsive. Okay, so CSS has a lot. And the thing is that most of you think that you know CSS. All right, you might not even know CSS enough. And in this course, we are taking you from beginners level to master's level. The kind of things we'll be talking about in later chapters, you'll be like, does this even exist? So we are going to just have an overview of it. Okay, so CSS decouples HTML structure from visual styling. Okay, so these are the importance of CSS. Okay, it decouples HTML structure from the visual styling. That means that is the separation of content that we have seen before. Okay, so CSS was developed in 1996. It was created to separate content from presentation. Then it got standardized by W3C, World Web Consortium, okay? And CSS specification has evolved over the years. So it is widely adopted by developers, okay? If you're building a web application, CSS is a major part of it. If not, your web application will not look good. Okay, so you need CSS. And what is the syntax like? What is the structure of CSS like? Although we will not be writing code, but let's just have a visual understanding of the syntax of it. Okay, so CSS work with selectors. And now look at it. You want to style HTML content. You want to style HTML element. You want to style HTML tag or something. So you have to select it first. You first of all select what you want to style before you now style it. So CSS use selectors to target HTML elements. So they can target HTML elements by their tag name. Okay, so we have element selectors. These element selectors, they target elements by their tag name. They target elements like div, P, H1, H2, span. Do you understand? IMG. Okay. So they target elements, they target elements by their tag name. We also have class selectors, okay, because our HTML elements, they have attributes called class. So you can give a particular element a class name, then you can now target that element by the class name. So that is where you use class selectors. Okay. So you can also target elements by their ID. Elements also have IDs. So if you want to target element by their ID, you use ID selector. And the ID selector is more specific because it is unique. No two elements in your HTML will have the same ID. Okay, so there's no two elements will have the same ID, so they are unique. So you can target, it is more specific when you target elements by their IDs, okay? But don't worry, we are going to talk more about CSS selectors in a later chapter. So what the syntax, what does it look like? Okay, we have CSS properties and the value. So after you target your element by the selector, you will now say, okay, I'm going to what now after selecting the element, what do? You say, okay, I want to target the color property of this element, or I want to target the I want to target the grid property of this element. I want to target the background color of this element. I want to target the font of this element. So you, after selecting the element, you are targeting a particular property of that element. So you specify the visual styles to apply in the properties. Then when you now get that property, you now give it a value. So if I want to style the color of I have selected the element and I've chosen the property of the element I want to style, I will now give it a value. If I chose to style the color of a particular element, that means I would give it a value like red, white, blue, black. Do you understand? So this is how it looks like. But don't worry, we are going to go down to coding in the next session. Okay, that's where we'll start coding. Okay, so you see this in real time. Okay, so you select, then you give the property, then the value. Okay, so CSS cascading and inheritance, we'll also be taking a look at it. How does this CSS rules, how do they cascade, and what is the inheritance? Okay, because CSS has something we call cascading precedence. It determines the final styles applied to an element. Okay, the cascading precedence of CSS determines the final styles that is applied to an element. Let me give you an example. I might a particular element might be targeted by different CSS rules, but at the end of the day, which one will be effective on it? I don't want to go deep until we get to cascading precedence. We'll talk about that in details. Okay. We have what we call inheritance hierarchy. Okay. Child elements, they inherit styles from their parent elements. Okay. If I style a div to have a color of blue, every element nested inside that div would inherit that property, that color. Okay, we also have what we call specificity calculation. Okay, so we'll be looking at all these things. It prioritizes the styles based on selector types. Okay, so we'll be looking at most of these things. Okay, so we also have something we call the CSS layout and styling. You can design the web page in a particular layout format that you want. Okay, so there's something we call the boss model. Okay, so there's something we call the boss model. We'll also talk about it. Okay, we'll talk about the boss dimensions. Now the boss dimension define the size and spacing of HTML elements. Okay, the boss dimensions, they define the size and spacing of HTML elements. Okay, we also have the boss properties, the margin, the border, the padding, and the content properties. These are boss properties: margin, border, padding. They are boss properties. Okay, but the boss dimension define the size and the spacing. Okay, what will be the size of this element? What will be the spacing between this element and other element? Okay, that is boss dimension. but the box properties are the margin, the border, the padding, okay? We also talk about the box sizing. It determines how the total width and height of an element is calculated. Okay, so we're going to be taking a look at the box model in a separate chapter. Okay, now you can also use CSS to position elements. Okay, you can give, there are different types of positioning. We have the absolute, we have the relative, we have the fixed, and we have the static positioning options. I know sometimes when you go over some websites, their nav bar, all right, their nav bar, as you're scrolling down, their nav bar would always remain on top of the web page. It doesn't go out. So they have positioned it in a certain way. So you're also going to learn how to do that. Okay. Now we'll also take a look at the box model because it also helps in CSS positioning. We see how do we position elements, how do we add margin, border, and padding to these elements. Okay. We are going to see how it looks like. So we also have something we call floating elements. We can make an element to float. Okay. And these are the things that are applied in CSS positioning, okay? So CSS can also help us in developing responsive design. We take a look at the flexible layout, okay? With the flexible layout, it adapts content to different screen sizes. Flexible layout of CSS is actually a property of CSS that makes content to adapt to different screen sizes. Some applications, like our platform, the Global Genius here, it adapts to different sizes of devices. Okay, for every device, it will have a different size, it will have a different styling. Okay, we also take a look at media queries where we apply styles. With media queries, you can apply styles to your web page based on the device characteristics. Okay, I can apply a particular style if a particular device has a certain width. Do you understand? So with media query, I can programmatically give styles to HTML element based on maybe the device width, the device height, something like that. Okay. We'll also be taking a look at the fluid typography that scales text proportionally to viewport. Okay, some text as the viewport is just the width of the device. So as the width of the device is increasing, the text would also increase. So we have a lot to learn in this CSS. So don't think that you know. Just assume that you don't know anything. Just humble yourself and learn. We have a lot to learn. So CSS for web development, okay, because without CSS, web development will not even be interesting. Okay, so CSS enhances web design. Okay, it separates structure and presentation. It improves consistency. Now, this is it's like the importance of CSS in web development. Okay, so there are CSS frameworks. Okay, frameworks that are streamlined. They provide streamlined development. They provide pre-built components and styles for faster web development. The thing is this, productivity matters when you're developing applications, okay? And sometimes if you want to do something, some people have already done it and they have provided it, they have provided the code for you. So all you have to do is to use it. So that's what we call pre-built components, okay? They make web development faster. You don't need to write everything from scratch, okay? We would also see frameworks for that enables us to do responsive design. This our platform. I use Tailwind CSS. So I used to with CSS and it made it easier for me because I have predefined classes that I can use. So it ensures consistent layout across different devices and screen sizes. So with Tailwind CSS, developing for mobile devices and for desktop devices, it was easy for me to make it responsive. Okay, so we also take a look at customization that allows for easy modification of styles to match brand identity. Okay, I can actually customize Tailwind CSS to match what I want. So we'll be taking a look at that too. That's something we also call CSS processors. Okay, something like SAS, less. Okay, we'll be taking a look at SAS and less. Okay, so processors enable modular CSS, variables, and missing for better code management. So you need to understand these processors so that it will be easier for you to write better code, more maintainable code, and it also improves productivity because processors automate repetitive tasks, boosting developer efficiency in web development. So you're going to learn how to use these processors. what they are and how you're going to use them so that when you're writing code, you'll be more productive, your code will be more maintainable, and it streamlines your development. Okay. So we'll also be taking a look at CSS best practices. Okay. With CSS optimization, okay, how do you efficiently use selectors? You use efficient CSS selectors to minimize DOM lookup. Okay, what lookup means, DOM lookup means is, before you style any element, you would have your program will have to look for it wherever it is in the DOM. DOM is document object model. So we'll take a look at it later. So your elements are in a tree-like format called DOM. Okay, so it will go from up down searching for that element you're looking for. But there is a way you could actually write CSS selector so it can minimize DOM lookup and it will make your program faster. You can also minimize your CSS files if they are big. You can minimize it to reduce the file size and improve load time because when your web page is loading, it will load your CSS. So if your CSS is 10 MB, it will load it. So you can minimize it, okay, using minification property of this, and you can also design modular. Okay, you can have a modular design where you can organize your CSS files into different small chunks that can be reusable by other components too. So these are the things we'll be taking a look at here. Okay, so you can use CSS for debugging. Okay, you can inspect your elements to locate CSS issues. You can test CSS in multiple browsers to ensure consistency in styling across the browsers. You can use debugging tools. You can leverage the browser dev tools to debug your CSS. Now, the thing is this. Sometimes your code, your styling might not work exactly how you want it. It's very, very frustrating, I can tell you. You are styling this thing, but it's not giving you what you want. You want this thing to have this flex box, you have this to have this grid, but it's not giving you what you want. You have to debug it. So we're going to take a look at how to also debug, test, and identify errors in CSS, okay? So you can also document your CSS, okay? CSS documentation, comprehensive guide to CSS syntax. Now, CSS has documentation where you can look up for so many things that you might forget. Okay, so there are techniques for creating mobile-friendly and adaptive layouts. Okay, there are optimization strategies. These are available in documentations. Okay, so let's just share with you resources and tools you could use to enhance your CSS journey. Okay, you can look for beginner's guide to CSS. Okay, it's a comprehensive introduction to CSS syntax and fundamentals. You can also look for CSS crash course. Now, you should also be researching while we are teaching you. You should also go and look for other resources to learn more. Okay, to learn more. You can also use W3 schools. You can use tutorials point. You can use MDN to learn more about CSS. Okay, so we also have some libraries. Okay, Bootstrap, Foundation, Boomer. But what we'll be looking at in this course is Tailwind CSS. We also look at some processors. We look at SAS and LESS. Okay, there are also CS in JS libraries, style components, emotion, and CS modules too. Sometimes we don't even know that our CSS can be validated and tested. You can validate your CSS syntax to make sure that it is going to give you what you expected. You can validate your CSS responsiveness. You can analyze your CSS performance. Okay. And these are the things we'll be taking a look in depth in this course. So by the end of this course, I bet you're going to be a genius in CSS. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next section. All right.